Welcome to the Men's Mysteries. Today I'm going to be interviewing Melissa Sandfort about IFS or International or Internal Family Systems, excuse me. And I'm super excited about that. I like presenting different modalities of self-exploration and work and being able to interview different experts on that work and what they have to share. I think a lot of times it's important for men and really people in general to get a good perspective of all the different resources they have available to us. So I'm really excited about that. If you're on YouTube, please go ahead and like and share this video, comment on it, tell other people about it. If you're on Substack, please go ahead and heart it, restack it, and share it. This is a great way for people to find out about this work and how it can apply to their lives. And this is true whether it's for men or women. While my focus on the men's mystery is definitely on men's health, that is a significant part of that is on helping men become safer for themselves and become safer for the world around them. And we do that by learning how to take better care of ourselves, by learning how to be emotionally resourced. And that doesn't occur without being willing to do this work. So without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce to you Melissa Sandfort. Welcome to the Men's Mysteries podcast. I'd love it if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do and how you change the world around you through the work that you do.
I'm I'm based in Chicago, but of course, like most people, I work, all over the world by Zoom or phone. And I've been doing internal family systems, IFS parts work for about 23 years now. And it's my total and complete dominating, ridiculous passion in life. And I've tried so many things for trauma healing and personal growth. And although I do like a lot of somatic, I think somatic work is really important. And I am a longtime practitioner of authentic movement also, for about as long as I've been doing IFS. I personally have, really decided that my deep passion is IFS. So although I bring a lot of somatics into it because I do a lot of somatic practices myself, and my IFS work tends to be pretty body based, I still, I really like the intersection of mind and body. I think that if we can use our big brains in intelligent ways to parse out how we're working with our consciousness, we can really get down to the root causes. And IFS, in my opinion, is the best way to get to the root causes of your trauma and your whatever, really, whatever problems you have as a human.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I recently read a book on internal family systems. I think it was a book by the person who first came up with it. What I didn't realize, and you just kind of highlighted it right now, is just like that you've been doing this for 23 years. So how long has internal family systems been around? And can we talk a little bit about what internal family systems is for people who may not be aware of what that is and what it means?
Yeah, so it's wacky because it's been around a lot longer than people think.
Hmm.
Actually, like 40 years.
Oh, wow.
Over 40 years. Richard Schwartz, the founder of IFS, he actually was based in Chicago, in the Chicago area. And when I was in college in the 90s, I had a therapist who was part of his original cohort, like of people that he was kind of training really informally. And so I even learned about it even before I started like formally doing training with it because I had an IFS therapist way back in the day, like when I was in college. So I'm kind of lucky that I'm in the Chicago area because I, have that extra like kind of historical roots in the area where he comes from. And so for people who don't know anything about IFS, the name is sometimes a little confusing because like, is it like family constellations? People wonder if it's that, and it's not at all. I
Hmm.
mean, it's just the name Family Systems comes from the fact that Richard Schwartz, the guy who founded it, was actually a leader in the field of family system psychotherapy, which
Okay.
is, yeah, like historically. So that's about like trying to get people in families. It was a family therapy technique, right? where like say, I mean, you know what? My family went to family systems therapy when I was a kid,
Hmm.
and it was evil. It was not good. Because what happened is my brother, he's like a jokester and a prankster, and he was, quote unquote, acting out, right? Like my parents, let's just be charitable and say they were not the most functional. Like so many of us have not so much functional parents, right?
Right.
Go to therapy. And in family systems therapy, the idea is that you see how, like, one person is like the identified patient, like, but they're really acting out the dynamics for the whole system, right? But like people who are not that emotionally aware are just going to hear he's acting out. He's the
Hmm.
problem. And they're not going to see like, no, I'm trying to explain to you how you're the problem that he's acting out. You know what I mean? That went right over their head. So anyway, but so family systems is about trying to get the family to be responsible for the dynamics of the family, which, as you can see in my case, went wildly wrong. So Richard Schwartz was trying to do that with families of kids who had eating disorders. And he did an outcome study and he found out that he could do all the stuff. He could like reorganize the family, just how all the family systems therapists said that you're supposed to. And he got no results.
Hmm.
And he was like, what? So he started to ask the girls, why are you still binging? Why are you purging? Why are you restricting? Right. And they started to talk about these parts of themselves, these voices that they heard in their heads that told them, you're worthless, you're this, you're that, you can't eat that, you're ugly, whatever, right? He got really curious about it. And over time, he developed this method of working with these, what he called parts, because like we all have parts of us, right?
Hmm.
Like, you have a part of you that says, oh, let's eat a salad for lunch. And another part's like, nah, man, we gotta eat that pizza.
Hmm.
And then they're like, no, you really should eat like, just be more healthy, and then they fight, right? Like we all have that experience. It's kind of like the ping pong match in our head between the good angel and the bad angel. And a lot of times people think that the good angel, right, the salad eater is who I really am. Like that's me. I
Right.
should, I'm the one who should do the quote unquote good thing, right?
Hmm.
But that's not true. Actually, there's a part that has like maybe societally, like this voice that has taken in ideas about what is the right thing to do based on society, right? And then you've got one that's like maybe more like, I just, can we have some fun? Can we eat some pizza today? Can you chill? Right? But you are not either one of them. In IFS, the idea is actually you have parts, but you also have one that doesn't take a side,
Mm.
one that doesn't take a side. And so the one that doesn't take a side is who your true self is. It's like the mediator between the parts. And so, I mean, a lot of people I think get confused about that because they think, no, 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 I'm the one that works hard, that eats the salad, that exercises every day. Like that is a good part, no doubt, but that's not who you truly are because like if you just think about a family, right? What if you had a kid that was always like wandering around, just, the prodigal son, right? Like doing the wacky stuff, like, getting into trouble, this or that. And then you had the kid that was the quote unquote good kid, right? That got all the straight A's and all this, right? But does the parent love either one of those kids more? I
Yeah.
mean, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Well, supposedly, I mean, that is kind of the interesting question about that when we come to the parents part, like
right.
the favorite kid or not. But it is an interesting thing because I also think that one of the, I'm going to call it societal dysfunctions, and I'll be curious to see your take on it, is this notion of individualism, this idea of like I have a singular identity that is how and that there's nothing else about it, like I'm like this static unchanging person, which I simply do not see in my work with men or just in people in general. I see a lot of changeability, but I think that there's this tendency to adhere and cling on to this idea of a singular identity. And what I like about IFS is that it seems to encourage the notion that there's actually a multiplicity of being within
Yeah,
within who we are.
exactly. So like the self is I mean, in the ideal world, it's like that ideal parent who has unconditional love for all the parts. all the kids, right? No matter how they show up. And so all the different parts, like Richard Schwartz's new book is called No Bad Parts. There are no bad parts, you know? They're
Hmm.
just different parts of you expressing different things. And so, like you said, I mean, you can have parts that, you know, yeah, are really into health, and then some parts that are really not into health. And what would it be like if all these different parts can coexist and can be part of who you are?
Right. And here's another kind of thought that I kind of want to explore. I've read No Bad Parts, so I'm familiar with it. With these parts, it seems like in some ways there's certain functions that these parts serve. So
Hmm.
what are some of the functions and how do we identify that? So using the example of the good salad eater versus the person the part that's like, hey, I just want some pizza. Can we just chill?
Yeah, so if you there's three main types of parts, but let me even back up. So there really, if you start, you could think of the deepest parts in us, which people have often heard of, are like inner children.
Hmm.
In IFS, they're called exiles. Those are the most tender, young parts of us who, because they're so sensitive, they've often have been wounded, like whether they were bullied or they were shamed or they were scapegoated or worse, carrying traumas. And then because of the crappy experiences they have, they carry burdens, which are negative beliefs or feelings like, I'm not lovable, I'm worthless, I'm no good, I'm not enough, right? Like, who doesn't have parts like that? So, at the bottom of our personalities, we could think of like these exiles as carrying these burdens. Now, notice the exile isn't the burden, right? It's just that it's weighed down by those negative feelings or beliefs. But now that it's carrying it like a backpack full of rocks, right? It like weighs us down. And if we all were blended with, if like we were like in that part of us all the time, we'd be crying in a corner, and we wouldn't be getting anything done. So, in order to protect us from those negative feelings and also to keep those exiles protected from more crap coming onto them from the outside world, because God knows they've got enough rocks in their backpack already. We don't need to add more, right? We have parts that want to protect the exiles from further harm and protect us from them. So it's like an inner outer thing, right?
Hmm.
So there's two different ways that we go about protecting our exiles. The first, and so they're called protectors, right? And so there's two different kinds of protectors. The first type of protector is a proactive protector, and they're called managers because they try to manage things so that they proactively don't let the exiles get triggered. For instance, say you have a sibling that like insults you or criticizes you, right? Well, if they do that, like, oh, your clothes are crap. Well, then, I mean, why would you call your sibling? You know what I'm saying? Like, what's in it for you? Your managers will say, don't call them. Like, we don't need to call them today, you know?
Hmm.
Maybe you only call them like when you really, really feel like you're like girded up and like able to do it. You know what I mean? But they try to like keep that person at a distance because they're proactively protecting you from being injured by that person, right? Or they might say, "Oh, I have to go like, visit my mom, but she's going to criticize me. So I'll try to dress like the perfect way that she thinks it's going to be like all, like the way that she's not going to criticize. I'm going to do my hair." So they make you look good. They make you appear, they're like your inner PR team.
Hmm.
So if you're all successful, also they make you succeed. Maybe you have like really success-oriented, obsessed parents, right? Which in this culture, there are many of them, right? So if I make the money and I have the little letters after my name and all this crap, right? And I show up in some fancy car, I don't know, right? Then they're gonna like approve of me. They're gonna be proud of me. They're not gonna criticize me. My exiles will be safe. So that's how managers proactively work on making you look good, succeed, keep it together, or avoid things so that the exiles don't get triggered. That's proactive protection.
Mm.
However,
Seems
Let's
like
face
that's a lot of hard work, though. And I think I observe that with a lot of people that it seems like a lot of times they're trying so hard to maintain a certain image that they're really not taking care of themselves.
right. I mean, but that is the essence of managers gripping and being in control of their personality. You know, like sometimes people have that like that saying, who's driving your bus? You know,
Right.
like if the managers are driving the bus of your personality, they're going to drive it over to like success town, look good town, whatever. Like they're going to do all that. And like you said, it can be exhausting. They can work you into a nubbin, right? For like you can look really good on the outside because they're trying to protect you, but on the inside, deep emptiness. And meanwhile, the other problem is the more that protectors protect the exiles, the lonelier and lonelier and lonelier and lonelier the exiles get, right? Because who's attending to their wounds? Managers can't do it. All they can do is throw like success in there. It doesn't feed the exiles. Exiles cannot live on like, an MBA.
Hmm.
They can't. They can't live on letters.
Right.
And then, I mean, so, but not only that, okay, but you can't, the world is crazy. Things are going to happen, right? So eventually you're going to get insulted or you're going to get criticized or something is going to trigger you that the managers couldn't control, they couldn't foresee, they couldn't success you out of, right? And in that case, you lose your job, who knows, right? Or a relationship could break up, like things happen. Then the exiles start to go, and the flames of their emotions start to fly up from the basement where you like try to lock them down there, right? Where the managers have them under lock and key. So when those flames start flaring up, that's why Richard called them these parts the reactive protectors. They're firefighters.
Hmm.
Love the name, think it's pretty fun, right? Because they put out the flames of the exile's emotions. And like real life firefighters, if your house is burning down, do they care? Like if they wreck your house? No. Like as long as your house doesn't burn to the ground, they don't care that it's like soaked and that they chopped like a hole in the roof?
Right.
Like your house is trashed, but they're like, we did our job, we're good, we're awesome, and you're like, oh my God, now I got to clean all this up, but they're like, you have a house, be happy, right? So that's inner firefighters are the same way. Like when your exiles start to like totally melt down, they do what they don't care what the collateral damage is. They will do whatever it takes to put the flames of those bad feelings out. They will stuff an entire box of Oreos in there, right? Like, just eat the cookies, you'll feel better. They'll like 10 episodes of Netflix, stay up all night, not a problem, right? They will numb, distract, like fun out, like to get above the flames or to numb the flames or douse the flames. So firefighters are the ones that really are associated with addictions. Because if you start to feel bad, they'll put the alcohol in there. They'll go like, oh, I think I do. Feel better. You know what I'm saying? 420 time. So that's firefighters.
This is all this is really interesting on a couple different levels because as I was listening to this, I was thinking a lot about my experience with working with men, as a men's coach and a facilitator. And one of the things that we talked about briefly before we started recording was how, like, for a lot of men, they get checked out. They don't do the emotional labor. They kind of leave that to the women in their lives, which I
Hmm.
don't think is the right way to do things at all. I think that really it take, for any relationship, regardless of what type it is, romantic, friendship, familial, or anything like that, it takes each person doing their part. But this kind of brings to mind, like with the firefighters, I see kind of like numbing. Okay, so
Yeah.
like alcohol, porn, video games, other or like some other kind of addiction activity that it's basically like, okay, well, we're just doing what we can do to get the fire out and get the exile back into what I'll call the comfortable discomfort. And then the
Yep.
manager who's trying to put on this whole show and be like, you're gonna keep it together. And of course, I mean, I see this with, and I've been that man where I pushed a lot of things down. I tried to maintain a certain image, and at a certain point, it broke everything repeatedly. and I say this like in regards to both work and relationships. And what I ended up ultimately realizing was like, this isn't working for me. It doesn't work. So how does IFS help a person, regardless of how they identify, but how does it help a person do that emotional labor on themselves instead of putting that on somebody else, which is, I think, a problem that we see a lot of times. So, like, how does that work?
Yeah, so one of the things is that a lot of times when people don't, so we talked about the three parts, right? We talked about managers and firefighters who are the protectors, who are protecting the exiles, right? And I like to think of them as existing in an equilateral triangle. So
Right.
in general, however far out your managers and firefighters are, like if you know one spot on the triangle, you kind of can infer the other two. So like if you have a firefighter who's doing a little bit of like smoking pot and Netflix, then you've got a manager that's kind of mildly critical and you've got some like firefighters with some like moderate trauma, right? But if you have like a firefighter who's further out over here, like your triangle is bigger, and they have like say an eating disorder, then you've got much more critical managers and you've got exiles who are like so far down here you can almost, like I can't get far down enough on the screen here to, and they probably have some very severe trauma, right? But now say you're even further out, okay, like so far I can't, my arm is over here, right? And like your firefighters are literally like shooting up heroin, then their managers are probably really, really mean, like really, really, like really telling them they're a piece of shit. And then way down here, like a lot of trauma, a lot of trauma. So how big your triangle is, right, is going to determine like how much, work it's going to take. And depending how big your triangle is going to determine whether or not you can even do the work on yourself. So that's the first thing is depending on how big your triangle is, if you have trauma that's so far down here, like that your protectors are just like, we are not going there. Because I mean, there are a lot of people, unfortunately, who have very severe traumas that they don't even know about. A lot of people are walking around with traumatic amnesia. And so the fear that like, well, what if I discover something I didn't even know? Like, that's not a crazy fear.
No, it's a very reasonable fear.
Yeah. So like, so for one thing, there's no shame in having a practitioner, right?
Hmm.
Like, so first of all, just to say, if you start to try to do IFS and your system is like, say what? We're not, your firefighter's like, ain't no way. And you just try to go there, and then suddenly you like an entire bag of chips later, you know, that may be a time to say, I got to get a practitioner. And there is no shame in that, right? Like I
Right.
started out doing, I had an eating disorder. So I was pretty far out. I had pretty deep trauma. I wasn't doing this on my own. That's not happening, and that's okay. There's no shame in that, right? So that's first.
Yeah, can I comment on that real quick before you continue?
Yeah. Yeah.
I just want to second that. I think it's really important. Um, having done a lot of inner work on my own over the years, I mean, at a certain point, there's a limiting belief that people can white knuckle their way through.
Mhm.
And I've seen this with a lot of men, but I've also seen it with people in general. And I've found again and again that that's simply not the case. Like I know, like if, like when I went through a breakup, last year, I got a therapist right away. It wasn't even a question in my mind. It was like, nope, I'm gonna go and get that help and that resource. And so, or like as a coach, like someone working with me. So I think that's really important. And I really appreciate you saying that because a lot of times I think people think, oh, well, I can figure out this system or do something else on my own. No, no, not necessarily. And sometimes you need that practitioner because they're going to bring a level of expertise. Like, you do this for a living. So I would go to you and work with you because I trust you that you know what you're doing with this and that you're going to be able to guide me in a real and powerful way to do this kind of work.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, honestly, it's like little kids when they first learn to ride a bike. I mean, if you gave a kid a book and said, okay, here's how to ride a bike, here's a bike, go. Like, how many kids are going to learn how to ride a bike from reading a book? You know what I mean? You need somebody like there to like help you. You need training wheels, and then you need to kind of learn how to do that balance. And IFS is very much, I feel like, this really weird inner balancing technique where you really need somebody to like make sure you're not veering off like into weird directions because the ability because we talked about the parts, okay? But the self is not the parts, right? We've got parts, these three parts, but we've also got a self. Like I said, the self is the mediator. It's the one that doesn't take sides. It's the like loving inner presence that is unconditionally loving to all the parts, managers, firefighters, and exiles, right? And only the self can heal the exiles.
Hmm.
Managers can't do it. They are not trained to do it.
Right.
Firefighters, I mean, please, that's not happening. I mean, no. Firefighters, So basically the thing is what we need to do is develop our inner sense of that, like who is my true self, the one who can relate to the parts with compassion. Like there's the 8 C's of self. So self has these qualities: compassion,
Hmm.
connection, creativity, curiosity, courage, confidence, clarity, and calmness, right? And so those are like those centered, conscious qualities that we want to bring to our parts to develop our relationship with the parts. With like the top one is curiosity. And so in general, when you're trying to work with your parts, what you do, say you have a part, like say you have these two parts that are, fighting about pizza versus salad. I always like to take food because, well, for one thing, I'm in an eating disorder. So I've worked a lot on like food issues. I had like sugar addiction. I just had like endless fights about food, so like I've heard it all, toffee. Oh, my nemesis. So, basically, when you have the managers like, we have to eat the salad, that's the only, we really got to be healthy. And then the firefighters are like, for the love of God, calm down. Doesn't it hurt anybody any pizza like one day, dude, right? And so then what you can do is just the self is not either one of them. And so you can like start to have like conversations with these polarized parts, with these parts who are fighting, where you go to one at a time and you're like, so I hear you really want to eat the salad. Yeah, that motherfucker ate toffee for like 5 days straight over Christmas. I am still disgusted and we need to recover, so I don't need this shit. Okay. I hear that what I hear is you're really upset. You're really upset about the binge that happened over Christmas. You're right, I'm upset. It's some crap. Why is that fucker always doing that? What the hell? I really hear that that's really hard. And I want to hear from you so that you're not going after this one, right? Because, I mean, for what it's worth, is that really getting us anywhere?
Hmm.
Usually the manager will be like, no, it's not. They're just a jackass. Okay. So then if you let me know how upsetting it's been for you, like that we had that binge, like I'd like to hear more about that. So you can start to talk to each part and kind of, air out their grievances with each other, like kind of like a mediator, right? Okay, so I really hear that you're really upset about that. Okay, now that you've heard with this part, let me go over, would it be okay with you if I could hear from this firefighter about their side of things? So you over the firefighter, hey, what's going on, man? That manager is trying to like, they're always trying to lock me down. I am not a rabbit. I cannot eat salad until the end of time. I got to eat some real food, motherfucker. I need some food, dog. This individual will not let me eat food. I know I ate toffee. Did I mean to eat the toffee? No, I had stress, okay? Christmas was stressful. I had to do that. All right. Was I shooting heroin? No. So this individual needs to calm down and I need a pizza right now. All right. And if the more they stress me out, the more pieces I'm going to eat. So, listen, why don't they just calm down and I'll eat one piece? Because if they don't calm down, I eat two. And if they get even more crazy, I eat three. You just watch me. How about that? So you're like, I hear you. I hear that you have a right to eat some food and that you're not a rabbit. And so you can kind of start to like really hear their both sides.
Hmm.
And that's the first step is just getting relationships with your protectors, getting a relationship with the managers, getting a relationship with the firefighters. And you can see both sides. I mean, neither one of them are totally crazy here. I
No,
mean, if
they all have something to add, and
yeah,
they're bringing something. I mean, I've had that very conversation, and I will just mention here, I've been open about it before, but I also experienced food disorder. I was anorexic in my 20s, so I get it, like how that can change things. I think a lot of times people have this perception that, like certain things are only like one gender or another or whatever. No, not necessarily. It's
Not at
true
all.
across the board. And I
Mhm.
think it's really important that we have those kinds of conversations and bring that out. I mean, this is a great example of something where like that, like on the one hand, like the firefighter could be like, okay, we're going to eat a lot more food because we're going to numb this experience. The manager's like, well, wait a minute, we can't do that. And then there's this back and forth, and the exile's just like, I just want to feel good about myself again.
Right. And the thing is that in this endless back and forth, like ping pong mania, between the managers and firefighters, the exiles get lost.
Hmm. Yeah, I see
And
that.
the reality is that why did the firefighters eat all the toffee over Christmas in the first place? It's not because they just wanted to eat like a pound of toffee. Like that was, I mean, a lot of when you first get to know firefighters, like, no, I'm having fun. It was fun. It was great. I love it. But when you really get to know them, they're like, oh, come on. I don't know. I don't love doing it, but I got to do what I got to do. They're very protectors are protectors. They think this is what they need to do to protect you. And if the firefighters think they need to eat a pound of toffee to protect the exiles, they will do that. And then they'll tell you they liked it. But when you really get to know them, they'll say, no, I didn't like that.
Right. It's basically there's even that act of saying they liked it was really just a form of protecting the exile because it's like, well, if I expose myself and I'm vulnerable, or I expose that part of me that's vulnerable, it's going to get rejected anyway. So better to just put on a face. So in a sense, a firefighter is kind of like a manager. It's just doing it from a place of extreme reactivity.
Exactly, exactly. They're both protectors. They're both protectors. And so then really it becomes the deeper IFS work. And I think a little IFS work goes a long way. Okay. So even if all you can do on your own is work with your managers or work with your firefighters, but you can't work with your exiles, that's still very powerful work that you can begin to do.
Hmm.
But then, some people, as they go along in their IFS work, they can start to do work with their exiles by themselves, but a lot of people are going to need a practitioner for the exile work. And so, really, what you can do with a practitioner, particularly, is negotiate and work with the protectors. Like, what are you afraid would happen if we go to those exiles who were so upset over Christmas that got you into the position of eating all that, toffee? Well, we might feel like so bad that we'll be dysfunctional. We will not be able to function. Okay, so that's a concern. That's not an unreasonable concern. So let's pick a time, like to like say when you see your IFS practitioner, see them on the weekend, when you've got some time to like be a little dysfunctional. Like don't see your IFS practitioner like Monday morning before a whole full week of work. Right? So, okay. So if we schedule it so that we do this on a Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon, so we got a lot of time to just kind of chill, recover from it, maybe, be a little dysfunctional for a day or two, like, but knowing that, we'll bite off this pieces of this work that are as manageable as possible, then would it be okay to do it? Well, what's in it for me? Good question. What's in it for you is that do you like the job you're doing right now? Do you like eating this much toffee? Not really, no. Okay. So if we can go to these exiles. We can do this. Like, believe me, I've done it hundreds and hundreds of times. We can go to them. We can witness what it is that caused them to carry these burdens of worthlessness and bad feelings, right? We can unburden them. We can help the exiles feel better. And then you won't have as many exiles to protect. It's not going to happen overnight. I'm not promising you Rose Garden. Don't be all mad at me if, like, tomorrow you're not the Buddha. Okay. That's not how this works. All right. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying over time, slowly but surely, you can protect less as we unburden the exiles more. Would you be interested in that project? I mean, what do you have to lose? I mean,
Right.
think how things are going isn't awesome. What if we did this project?
So in a very real sense, it's freeing up all that internal, emotional, mental energy
Mm-hmm.
and in the process reallocating it and
Yes.
giving that part, which has its own personality as well. Let's just acknowledge that. Giving that part something to do that it actually enjoys, where it can actually
Yes.
serve the overall collective instead of continuing to do what it's doing. I mean, I think that that's absolutely a beautiful thing right there. And talk about a great way to emotionally to not just even emotionally manage yourself or regulate yourself or whatever the term we want to use. I mean, I don't even know if I want to really use those terms because it doesn't sound, it just sounds so clinical in a way. But how to like get back in touch with the juicy parts of yourself in a way that is actually empowering for it. That's I think I like that better. That's a better description right there.
Yeah, yeah, freeing parts up from these like repetitive trauma-based patterns that they're just like living out, living out, living out. They're expending so much energy protecting against the burdens and then living from the burdens. And it's like, oh my God, that's like living with a mouth full of like teeth that have cavities, you know? Just go to the dentist, get the filling. Because then you can like use your teeth like in a happy way instead of always having pain and like being worried about, oh, I can't eat a lemon, you know? Yeah.
So this is I mean this is a great example of kind of doing all this work and what it leads to. How does this integrate into somatic work? You mentioned that some of the work that you do is also somatic, and I'm definitely a believer in doing somatic work. I think that there is a lot to be said for how something lands and lives in the body. So how does IFS intersect with somatic work, and how do we integrate those together to do this work?
Yeah, so one of the main ways is this question, where do you feel it in your body?
Hmm.
Whenever you're working with parts, a good IFS practitioner who's like at all embodied or at all somatically inclined is going to ask, when you're working with your parts, where do you feel that part in your body? So
Hmm.
that you can begin to like connect parts to your embodiment, you know? And if you have a lot of managers, a lot of times you just feel it in your head, or I mean, sometimes people are so numbed out by parts that like they're just like, I don't feel it. I don't feel it. I worked with someone who just for years and years was like, I don't feel it. I don't feel it. But I still asked, you know, because it's not about, you know, being there, right? It's about the journey. And so I would just keep, that's just part of my work. I just always ask, where do you feel it? How are you experiencing it? And over time, they did develop a little bit more of a capacity to be like, well, maybe there's a little bit of a, like a scrunching, you know? And so you, wherever you start where you are, and then you begin to develop that repertoire of being able to feel it, you know, or get a sense of how you're experiencing it somatically. And the more that we do that, the more embodied we become. And I mean, you know, being a whole human, I really feel has to do with being embodied. And
Hmm.
so the more that we can feel our bodies and know what we're sensing and feeling in our bodies, the more whole and free we're going to be. And so by constantly noticing where your parts are in your body, you can begin to connect your consciousness and your inner world to your felt sense in that way. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then yeah, so I mean, I could identify, for example, that like my exile might be like deep in my chest, and
Mhm.
then that when my manager is at play, the manager is maybe here in my throat, and then the firefighter might come up and be like on my shoulder. Something
Exactly.
like that. I mean, I'm using that as a broad example, but
Yeah.
and that they could even occupy certain shapes or colors or things like that that are experiential that would help to bring them out further and give them a bit of voice or felt experience, and at the same time allow the person to really connect with all three parts.
Oh, big time. I mean, I'm I'm so obsessed with inner imagination. Like it's ridiculous. The more I do IFS work, the more I just elaborate on the inner world. And I love to like, I just love to be really creative about how to work with parts. So I love to, I think that especially when you're starting out with parts, it's great to externalize them because it is like this very inward weird thing of like, what is this part? Like, I don't know, is it a voice? You know what I mean? So like if you can get it out in front of you, whether you like say you use like index cards and you write, a description of the part on the card so you can see, okay, this is my part that I'm working with, and you can move them around. Or like, I also use finger puppets, which I usually have like 8 million around me. But like, so yeah, wait, let me get some finger puppets.
All right, we'll wait here for you here.
I got like tons of finger puppets. So like this.
Oh wow, those look so cool.
I know. So they're so fun. I mean, and my parts just have they just have such a fun time. I mean, you're like, okay, I'm a dragon, I'm a fox, I'm a fish, I'm a
Well,
bear.
and what a great way to kind of to personify them and bring them
Yeah,
out and at the same time give them a place in your body with one of your fingers.
firefighter.
Well, there
Yeah,
you go.
exactly. I mean, it's so fun. I mean, originally my parts wanted to be stuffed animals, and my managers were like, and my firefighters were both like, no, no. The exiles were like, we want to be like stuffed animals, and my protectors were like, I'm an adult. I'm not gonna have a house full of stuffed animals. That's unacceptable. And my exiles were like, wah, wah, okay. So then one day I went to IKEA and we saw these IKEA finger puppets. These are the original ones. The very original ones were these IKEA puppets. They were like these fish types. And my ex said, well, you said we couldn't have them because they would take up too much space, but how much space could finger puppets take up, right? Which was pretty, legitimate. And so my managers were like, well, all right, fine. So we got 10 finger puppets. And then, oh my God, I had like thousands of finger puppets and they took up all the space in my house and, an exile
But
an inch. But yeah, but so I love using finger puppets. But I also think that, you can use like a conference table. You could kind of organize them like, oh, like it's like my inner team sitting around a table. Or you could do mind mapping, like oh, here's a part and then oh, here's this part here and this part here. So there's just you could journal with them, you could do dialoguing, like self part. So there's so many. I mean, I also use voice memos. You could talk to your parts out loud in voice memos. You could do video, right? So I mean, tons of ways to externalize your parts, which I love to teach. Yeah, that's like one of my things that I enjoy is teaching like ways to externalize parts.
and it makes sense. I mean, when we externalize our parts, we're giving them voice, we're bringing them out, and it gives us an objective record to look at. I mean, when I can look at a part and actually allow that part to express itself fully, it's like, oh, here's this way of being, or this discovery, or something else along those lines that can be worked with in a meaningful manner. So I totally get that. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and even with finger puppets, say you have like a bunch of finger puppets that you work with, then like I'd put them on the rug or something and just take a picture of all the finger puppets and then make a little list of all the parts I worked with so you can even, keep kind of track of them that way. Yep.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So, what other projects are you working on? I know that you do a lot of work with IFS with clients, but are you working on, and I also know you're on Substack because
Hmm.
this episode's going to show up on there. So tell us a little bit about what you share on Substack and kind of what your other projects are.
Yeah, well, Substack is wacky because I originally thought that I would do like, just share IFS insights on Substack, right? So I write my first Substack and I'm like, hey, I don't think I wrote that. I'm like, wait a minute, like I didn't write that. Like one of my parts took over and wrote it.
Hmm.
So okay, because I do that on Facebook, because I curate my Facebook feed like super carefully, like so my parts are just used to like taking over and writing whatever they want on Facebook. And so with my consent, you know what I mean? Like they're not totally freaking out, whatever. Because I kind of like, in IFS, there's this idea that you have a self, right? And you have parts. And if your parts take over, if they drive your bus, the way that IFS describes that is blending with parts. But I also think that there's a way you could, if a part knows it is a part and you know it's a part when it's speaking, then that's not really blending because like it's by consent in a way. You know what I mean? It's like I call that embodying a part. It's letting the part be fully expressed while knowing it is a part and you knowing it's a part, right? So like on the spectrum, like where blending is you totally don't know it's a part, then embodying is you do know it's a part, right? So basically, on my Substack, I allow my parts to embody, but they know that they are parts, right? And they speak very like clearly and like with great differentiation about being parts. So anyway, they took over my Substack, pretty much the first post. And then once one part took over my Substack, other parts were like, well, if they can write the Substack, I can write the Substack. This was like, we're off to the races. So now my parts pretty much write my Substack, and they talk to me sometimes, and then sometimes they talk to each other. They just do whatever the hell they want to do, and they just do their healing work. And it's basically like me doing my IFS work in public. So it's pretty, that's why I call it radical IFS, because it's pretty radical. And I think because I have so much IFS experience, and because the way that I do IFS is very IFS like aware. Like I'm always like parts are always talking about being an exile or being a firefighter or being a manager. So when I write my Substack, it's like a lot of IFS education in a really wacky format. So I think it's a great way to learn IFS because I like to learn what my parts are saying because they teach me about, what parts, what it's like to be a part, what it's like to be a manager, what it's like to be a firefighter, what it's like to be an exile. And so yeah, it's a pretty fun project. And now my new kind of learning edge on Substack is I'm starting to do podcasts of my work on that I do on voice memos.
Hmm.
Where I'm actually talking to my parts out loud. And then I just uploaded one and I'll be uploading a few more. But my issue is I really have a deep thing with my exiles because they're like, yeah, we want to get out there. And I'm like, you are exiles. You cannot be out and about on the internet, even Substack. It's not safe. You are like there's a reason we have protectors, right? Like some of these parts are 4 years old. I'm like, no, you're not going to be out and about on the internet, dude. It's not happening. And they're like, but we want to be out and about. We want to explain things. We want to tell people stuff. And I'm like, I hear that you do, and you're going to be paywalled. That's how it goes. Like, like this is not negotiable. I mean, I'm not having 4 year olds because my parts also have different voices. Like that's one way that I mean, to embody parts is not easy because you have to like shift your consciousness, what I mean, from one part to another. And like, I mean, I do it pretty rapidly at this point, but one of the ways I do that is by using different voices. And so my exiles have like, they have really kid-like voices.
Hmm.
And I am not having anybody mock, that voice.
Hmm.
Just I'm not available for that. I don't want my exiles to have that experience. And I would bet you money that if it was out and about on the internet, that some troll's gonna come and what a stupid voice. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, there's always that potential. I get that, and I hear that. And I also think at the same time, I celebrate your willingness to be vulnerable, to allow for, you know, some of that to come out in whatever way or form it does. I mean, I think that, being vulnerable in this day and age, in any day and age, is always kind of like, well, how much do I really share? How much do I talk about? And of course, there's always going to be people that don't agree with what you're doing, for whatever reason. And there's usually it's because there's something that's landed in their system that they're not owning or acknowledging. I mean, that's what I
Yeah.
find a lot of the time. Or like or like the person who feels like they have to be a troll just for the sake for their own amusement or whatever else. Like, all right, well, more power to you, I guess. But I'm not gonna really I'm not gonna feed you. I
Yeah,
have,
but the thing is, I mean, like that's like, I mean, protectors or like self energy, you know, I think is more capable of being like, I have that, I understand that, but I think that my 4 year old parts just don't, I'm not sure that that would be like, that they would really be able to that. It would take a lot of work on my
right.
part if they were in hurt that I need to use to heal like the other things I need to heal. I don't need to heal other people's random crap if they come and take a poop
No,
on my Substack
totally.
base.
No, I fully hear that, and I appreciate that as well. Yeah, I think it's And I think that's a really good point. Like, that's part of establishing healthy boundaries, right? This is also kind of goes back to the emotional labor that we do. Like, well, what's the healthy
Ah.
boundary for me? How do I set that boundary and honor and acknowledge that and at the same time give myself the voice? And I think that like that's the healthiest version is where I have clear boundaries around what I'm going to do and how it goes out there. And then, I enforce them. So like it sounds like that's exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, Taylor, I really like that angle of approach on it, that it's an issue of basically like emotional labor. Like, it's true. I mean, I can work hard not to be impervious to trolls, but they're still taking a shit on my lawn and they're not cleaning it up. And I'm the one who has to clean it up. And I'm
Yeah.
not interested. Like, I don't have time for this. Therefore, I'm going to do what I need to do to protect me from their, I don't know, littering, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
makes sense. So,
Hmm.
other than Substack, where can people find you if they want to learn more about your work or how to or how they can work with you?
Yeah. Well, I have a website, 1000paths.com, which is really like difficult to find because that's like, how do you spell that? Um, but by the time this comes out, I will have DIYIFS,
Okay.
do it yourself IFS. But it really, because I came up with this really good name for my classes, which my parts think is so cute, which is Deeper Intimacy with Yourself.
Hmm.
DIY, get
There
it?
you go. I love it.
So DIY IFS is probably the easiest way to find me, or otherwise, uh, Radical IFS, Substack.com. Yeah. So those are the
Okay.
two places. Yeah.
Perfect. And people who are watching the show will be able to find those in the notes. And then the final question I ask all of everyone that I interview is, what's a word of wisdom or a final thought that you can share with us that we can take out there into the world as we move forward from this podcast?
My cutting edge right now is gratitude.
Hmm.
So, I would say, although it's maybe cliche, uh, a doorway to a slightly higher state of consciousness, a doorway to accessing your own self energy, like right now in this moment, is always gratitude. So
Hmm.
even if it's just the dumbest thing, like I just one part D, and D, I love D. D's an exile, D's like four, and D is ferocious and often gets just is always like, don't touch me. Just don't touch me. Because D's had a lot of trauma. D's like working it, And D's D's little angle on gratitude. I mean, because gratitude sounds kind of like a platitude, But D's angle is like D will be like really mad at somebody, like Sharky, my main firefighter, like Sharky, why are you messing with me? You know? And Sharky's like, because you're funny. And D's like, I don't care. I got things to talk about. So they get into it. And then all of a sudden, just randomly, D goes, look at this guy. Huh. Aren't the clouds nice? It's so weird. It's like just this momentary like break in the drama. And that's how D expresses gratitude, is by looking at the sky. So I would say either for protectors for whom it is available to look around and go like, man, I'm really grateful for XYZ, or for other parts for whom gratitude is like a platitude, like firefighters who are maybe like, fuck gratitude, right? Literally just looking at the sky or looking at something that just gives them joy, and just taking that one beat to receive. Because I think sometimes we don't, I don't know, like we're not as good at receiving.
Hmm.
And so receiving is always something, whether it's like through the lens of what can I be grateful for, or through the lens of how can I just take a moment to just receive. Because as I do IFS, and I think as people do more inner work, we really learn we're really held by the universe, right? Like we're all actually, there's something deeper going on here. And when we can just touch into it, even for a moment, we can receive that nourishment from it. And that's kind of a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, man.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on to the show. I'm happy to have you here, and this was a very fun and interesting interview, and it was fun to learn a lot more about IFS from someone who is practicing it and living it.
Very much, very much. Taylor, thank you so much. And thank you for the work that you're doing because I really I I feel like I'm a big champion of all parts, but in particular managers, because a lot of times people get really aggravated with their managers. And I'm also a really big champion of men because we live in a culture where there's a lot of discourses that are maybe not so friendly. And I just think that literally does no one any good.
Thank you. I really appreciate and receive that. All
Yeah.
right. Well, have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too. Thanks.
That was Melissa Sandfort from radicalifs.substack.com. So go check out her work. It is really fascinating and interesting, and I think we've gotten a really good taste of IFS and how IFS can be used in the kind of the work that we do for ourselves. And I encourage you that like if you're trying to do some of that work yourself, do reach out to somebody who can help you with that. I mean, the journey is not meant to be gone on alone. Too many people in general, I'm not just talking about men, but too many people in general tend to white knuckle their way through life. Definitely a lot of men do. I used to be one of those men. I don't do that anymore. When I need help, I get help, whether it's from a brother or from someone who is qualified as in a certain modality or whatever else, because at the end of the day, that's what we need. And again, please heart, share, restack, like, comment, and otherwise share this content with other people out there. That is how this work gets out there and helps people transform their lives. Thanks again for watching the show.